Thank you all for joining me today. I wanted to, I don't so much want to apologize, but I want to explain. Sometimes we're a little late because we're finishing up details that are important to all of you who are here. And so the whole point, I'd rather that we be on time and be as effective as possible for you all to get all the resources that you need to do all the great services you do. If we can't do those both, then I'd rather be late and still be effective and make sure that we spend the time before to make sure that the accounting's right and that everybody gets all that you need that we can give you at this time. And so we were downstairs working out some problems, making sure that we were maximizing all the resources and putting them in the right columns and making sure everybody gets what they need. So that's my, I guess, apology. My colleagues are ready, and we're ready to move forward. First item, let's convene this meeting.
The meeting is now in session.
Meeting is now in session. Let's begin with public comment.
Yes, we have 3 cards for general public comment.
Okay, great. So can we hear first from Stephanie Wolfe? Stephanie, come on up. Yeah, how are you? Bill, good to see you. I haven't seen you for a little bit. Welcome back. And then I think I have Hema. Is after Bill? Okay, so you get 1 minute. And so, Stephanie, welcome.
Thank you. My name's Stephanie Wolfe. I'm a residential property owner in the 90065 zip code. I'm unable to legally deal with an overcrowded unit in my property due to the restrictions of rent control and the refusal of the Rent Stabilization Board and the Department of Health, Building and Safety to enforce maximum occupancy standards. As a result, I'm bound by habitability, fire and safety standards, but have absolutely no means to control the overcrowding of my unit. I would like to ask this committee to reinstate maximum occupancy limits and enforcement. There are such limits and enforcements with Section 8 and other stabilized housing, but landlords with property under rent control have no such protections, and although their rentals are regulated and inspected.
So amplify the habitability requirements.
I want to enforce maximum
Right.
Occupancy so that
So that's comparable to the other regulated
yeah.
sectors. Okay.
Right now, Building and Safety will not enforce it. Fire Department says go to Building and Safety. Housing Authority says Building and Safety. Building and Safety says that has been omitted and it is no longer enforced.
Yeah. Got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Bill Huey. I'm president of Fair Housing Coalition. We're a landlord organization that believes in equality under the law for renters and landlords. This month's issue of the AOA magazine, which goes out to 100,000 landlords in and around L.A., shows a housing inspector with his pants down. I actually videotaped a team of housing inspectors going into a building and unlocking the doors when tenants were not home because one of the members of my coalition was being harassed by the LHD. So he went to court and he sued, and he won. And the LHD, whoever makes the decisions there, was so infuriated, they went to another judge to override. The judge that gave him the win said, only bother this landlord when you get a complaint from a tenant or when it's his turn for SCEP, like once every 3 years. They were hitting him once a year looking for, and he runs beautiful buildings. Anyway, they hit his building, and he went to his lawyer, and the lawyer put a sign on the door, do not enter. You know, the tenant said they didn't want the housing in there. So they brought a locksmith, and they picked 20 locks in the building. And the tenants are not happy, and I don't see how that serves anything. I mean, they may not like them, but I wrote a front-page story. The views on the Internet now are at 6,000. I'm going to drop 1 copy at each of your offices. This is outrageous.
Thank you, Bill.
Okay, thank you.
Is this Hema? H-E...
Herman.
Oh, hi.
Herman.
Mr. Herman.
You look at that.
It's a signature, sir.
Okay.
Good afternoon. As you heard the speaker right now just speaking about that information about picking locks and intrusion of our privacy to our homes and rent, you know, Felipe Fuentes is the main culprit of all this because, again, There is no such thing as affordable housing in Los Angeles. There is no such thing as rent control. You have thousands of homeless people on our streets, and you can't afford to provide them the access to livable, habitable housing? Shame on you, Mr. Fuentes. Take that back to Sacramento with no disregard for the homeless population. And then yet, Mr. Kern Price, in your area, so many people are homeless. All I ask is give them the dignity and respect as human beings and provide them homes. Don't come up with this jargon of litigation and long process of hearing us rant about it. Do something about it. Because if not, you're not an American. I'm more American, fighting on behalf of people who can't defend themselves for accessibility to habitability and rental
Thank you,
arrangements.
Mr. Herman. Let's move on to item number 1.
Item number 1, Los Angeles Housing and Community Investment Department to report relative to authorization to write off loan losses for program years 38, 39, and 40.
Good afternoon. Vasquez Jancizian with the Housing Department.
Yes, I'm interested. We are here dealing with the budget. We've got cuts. We're trying to figure out every dollar we can find to build affordable housing, to recapture foreclosed units. And so I'm just reticent to forgive any loans at this moment without an understanding of who made the loan, what were the commitments, what's the consideration in exchange for the forgiveness, and why are we doing that? And are there any other alternatives to recapture that? Because every dollar is precious at this moment, and when we're looking at cuts for various other programs and looking for money that we can find anywhere for, as I said, recapturing foreclosed homes and working to buy down covenants, why would we forgive even one penny?
You are correct. Actually, we're not forgiving any loans or waiving any interest. Those are situations where we have no choice but to consider these loans uncollectible because of foreclosures or short sales or bankruptcy that they have filed by senior lenders, and we are just forced to write them off basically because we have no legal recourse to recapture these loans or whatsoever.
Can you give us like a little inventory of what these loans are? And I don't understand why we don't have a choice. Can't we stand in line like other people standing in line, even on bankruptcies, etc.?
We do actually. Actually, for every foreclosure, we make an internal report. We review the loan, the status of the loan. We take in consideration where we are in line as far as recapturing these loans. And if there are any potential, we either participate in the foreclosure to recapture this property, or if we're convinced that there's no value, basically, we just let it go through the process. And if there are any excess cash, we recapture them automatically. So we do follow up on every individual loan to make sure that our interest is protected.
So how does that reconcile with writing off the loans? And maybe I'm not understanding what we're doing here.
Basically, the values, when the value is not there, or when there's no more funds left to pay off our loan, we have no choice but to write that loan off. It goes through a foreclosure. The senior lender gets either fully paid off or partially paid off, and the property gets transferred. This is because of this recent issues we're having with the housing crisis, where the value is not there. The house is underwater, basically. There's more loans on the property than the value itself. And they're decreasing gradually. Every year we see less and less. But still there are a lot of foreclosure happening out there, especially on single family.
So I guess I'm sort of in the same position as Mr. Cedillo. So I understand that there's no value. So let's say are we primarily in second or third place? Are these soft seconds? What was the product that we put out?
For home ownership, and you are correct, we are either second or third and sometimes fourth position. So we have to stay in line to recapture our share. And the senior lenders, obviously, as you know, they will protect their interest first. And we, 99.9%, we always subordinate to senior lenders to make these homes more affordable.
No, and that part I understand. So if somebody purchased a property and the value isn't there, and it's foreclosed upon, I could see how the window is closed for us to be able to recover anything because it's been foreclosed or there's been a short sale. But how much of what you're proposing for us to write off actually can we afford to sort of write out? I mean, are there any in the inventory here that it's a function of time that we have hope to sort of recover any of it, or is this all cases that have been foreclosed and or short-sailed?
It's the latter. Basically, it's done deal. There's no any chance for us to recapture these.
So the properties are gone. They're all short sale. Everything that's before us.
Foreclose or short sale, most 90% of those.
Okay.
Short sale, basically, this is when we get engaged to prevent the foreclosure. In short sales, we're able to recapture some of our loans because there's still possibility to negotiate with the lenders, with the borrowers. Short sales, we have more chance on recapturing partially our loans, our investments.
So our total. So I'm looking at page 4 of the report that was advanced by HCID. So you've got a chart there that sort of indicates that, not sort of, it indicates that there's a total of 91 loans essentially that we're writing off. Is that correct?
That's right.
And so these 91, the houses are gone essentially. So is our position. Of these 91, rather, the 91, is that a universe of larger loans out there? I mean, is there another 100 out there that we're watching? What is the universe of
The
loans?
single-family portfolio, it's comprised of about 4,500, give or take, loans that we have on single-family, and this is 91 units are part of that portfolio.
Of the 4,500.
Right.
And so I have to imagine that, whatever it is, 4,100 or so of the loans that are outstanding, do you all have the ability to help us understand when those loans were given so we can understand whether these were during the sort of problematic times, 2008 through 2012? That would give us a sense then at least that those are probably in danger, and we probably need to figure out something if there's anything to do, but it shouldn't jeopardize any of the stock that was out there beforehand. I'm assuming that if somebody refinanced a house prior to 2007, chances are that we recouped our money. How much is sort of in that problem danger zone?
I'd like to say majority is between 2006 and 2008. Those loans were given during that period of time through our homeownership program where the values, the houses were maximized as value-wise, and we made those loans to these properties, and then they lost their values. So that's the period you're looking between 2006 and 2008. And we do assist these homeowners in refinancing, restructuring these loans whenever we can assist them. Either they approach us, most of them they do approach us, and we work with them. Those 91s is basically that we couldn't find any ways to assist, and the senior lenders basically were insisting on foreclosing, and we couldn't negotiate.
Sure. So for the ones that are in sort of that danger zone, are you all doing the analysis now to try to understand if there's a way for us to encourage folks to avail themselves of lower interest rates and refinance, so at least we hopefully can pull some of our dollars out of any potential problem in the future?
Actually, we don't have a specific program, but we do receive a lot of requests for refinancing just for those specific areas that you mentioned to reduce their interest rate or allow them to refinance and cash out if they need to pay for their financing costs. We work very closely with most of those single-family loans. On a regular basis, if I have to estimate on a monthly basis, we get at least anywhere to 6 to 10 subordination requests just to address those issues.
Are we currently providing homeownership loans now?
Yes,
Seconds, we are. And so,
Limited, though, very limited basis because I believe funding issue.
And so how are we making sure that we've learned from this sort of mistake? I understand that no one could have predicted, unless you have a sort of a crystal ball, no one could have predicted the housing crisis and the severity of it. But I have to imagine that now that we've learned some things of no documentation type first loans, maybe we're not as willing to sort of get into a secondary position so that we don't find ourselves in this position again. Are we modifying our program, or is there any work by the department to modify how we lend money in the future?
We have historically been very conservative when it came to these loans. The department, it's been very conservative. That's why we weren't impacted as other institutions from foreclosures. We make sure that the interest rates are reasonable, that they're based on market rates, nobody's taking advantage of. We make sure the loans are fixed rate loans so that there won't be any surprises on the long run. And besides that, just the usual background checks. There's no specific way to guarantee from happening this kind of disasters, but those are the things that we have been doing historically and we continue doing so.
Sure. I mean, I understand our intention. We're trying to promote homeownership. You have to temper that with the risk associated with being in a second or third position. But at the same time, if there's a way for us to mitigate any potential write-off in the future, every 10 years there's a cycle. And so we're on the event horizon. Again, the estimations is in another 3 or 4 years, values will get lost again, and we may find ourselves in another sort of rut. But I fully understand if the value isn't there, then there is no choice but to write off.
And I just want to say that the desire is so strong for homeownership. We really want to assist those first-time home buyers specifically.
Sure.
It's so important for them. So we just try our best. That's all I can say.
Yeah, I mean, I think it just is a statement that we have to really make sure that we're promoting rental opportunities as well, because it's about quality and affordable housing. That comes in many forms, and years ago there was a real move towards ownership. It may not be for everybody.
True.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Price?
I'm curious. First of all, I certainly support home ownership efforts. Sometimes I know the city does take a chance. Not enough funds are available frequently to promote these programs, especially for those first-time buyers. But curious about this dispute settlement piece. There was one case, it appears, that
Right.
is that subject to some kind of negotiation, or what kind of dispute resolution resulted in that one that
Actually,
weren't able to take advantage of?
that was an exception. The dispute was with the contractor about the performance of the work. I don't have the details with me today, but that's the nature. It was a dispute over scope of services provided during the construction. But I can follow up and, if you like, get back to you. Sure, absolutely.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Members seeking your direction?
And, sir, we have a comment card on that item.
Okay. Mr. Herman?
Well, we all know that the recession was coming, and the result, it damaged our housing. There is nothing more offensive than anyone not taking action to prevent this. You allowed the lenders to abuse the banks and the banks to abuse the people that were asking for these loans. Some of them are within your own departments who've lost their homes under foreclosures and short sales. So the losers are you, who didn't take any action at the time. And now the result is a population of people without a home who want to be homeowners, but because the economy doesn't balance and checks and balance itself at this point, now there is nothing affordable or rent effective for us to live in. That's the reason why you have on 300 on Hope in Washington, all those homeless people in the streets near Trade Tech, where Obama went. That's insulting.
Thank you. Colleagues?
I don't think we have an option here. The properties are gone, the values are gone, the loans are gone. I think we have to accept the report. So I would make a motion that we move the report as presented by the department.
Thank you. Moved in second, so be the order. Items 2 and 3.
Item number 2, HSID report and CAO to report relative to authorization to execute a contract with AG Pacific Construction and Development Corporation for HSID's urgent repair program.
My understanding, we're prepared to move that on consent.
So moved.
And we have a city administrative officer report recommendations. You are moving those items, sir?
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
correct? Yep. We got a motion, we got a second. Mr. Price? So moved. So be the order.
HSID report and CAO to report relative to authorization to negotiate and execute a contract with Southern California Housing Rights Center for the period of April 1st, 2015 through March 31st, 2016, with 2 one-year options to renew to provide citywide fair housing program services.
My understanding is that's a consent item.
Okay.
And we also have a city administrative officer report on this item.
Motion, Mr. Senator?
Second.
So moved. Second. Moved and seconded. So be the order.
That brings us to item number 4.
Item number 4.
Item number 4, communication from the mayor, HSID report, and CLA to report relative to the budget for the 41st program year of the Housing and Community Development Consolidated Plan, 2015 to 16 third year action plan.
I'm sorry, sir. We would need to go back to items number 2 and 3. There are speaker cards on that item.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, we have 2 items, 2 and 3.
Well, Angelinos, we're talking about urgent repair program. I can't say nothing negative about it because we're all in need of urgent repair programs. Maybe they could help the housing issue or the rental issue. But let me go on to now point number 3. Southern California Housing Rights Center for the period of April 1st, 2015 through March 31st, 2016 with 2 one-year options to renew, provide citywide fair housing program services. We'll get it through your hard-headedness. There are no affordable housing programs. I would know. I investigated them all in the city of Los Angeles. As far as I'm concerned, if you say that you're not touching or presuming that we do not know that you are using general funds for any of these programs, I find it in violation of state and federal laws because the allocations of grants are a part of these programs within the local government. So don't dare me not, Miss Ana Guerrero of the mayor's office. I say to you, Eric Garcetti, you do nothing to any of these issues when it comes to the reports and authorization to negotiate on behalf of your constituents.
Thank you.
Would you like to move to close public comment on items 2 and 3 and return to item number 4?
I would.
Thank you.
Item number 4.
Item number 4, communication from the mayor, HSID report, and CLA to report relative to the budget for the 41st program year of the Housing and Community Development Consolidated Plan, 2015 to 16 third year action plan.
Welcome.
Good afternoon, Andrea Galvin, CLA. As you know, the Mayor's Office presented the proposed budget for the 41st Consolidated Plan, also known as the CON Plan, to this committee in January of this year. The CON Plan allocates funds through 4 federal grants over a 12-month period from April 1st, 2015 to March 31st, 2016. Those 4 federal grants are Community Development Block Grant, also known as CDBG, Home Investment Partnership, also known as HOME, Emergency Solutions Grant, or ESG, and Housing Opportunities for Persons with AIDS, also known as HOPWA. There were some challenges in developing the CON Plan this year, especially in terms of CDBG. In determining the amount available for CDBG funds, we use our entitlement amount, program income, and prior year savings. Since the release of the mayor's proposed CON Plan, we were informed of our actual entitlement, which was approximately $642,000 less than the mayor's budget had estimated. In addition, the Housing Department notified our office that their projected program income estimations for program year 40 and program year 41 were over forecasted by approximately $8.8 million. Fortunately, our office was able to identify additional prior year savings to make up for this loss of funding. However, because prior year savings cannot be used in calculating cap limits for public service and administration, these two categories had to be reduced significantly. Public service had to be reduced by approximately $735,000, while the administration category was reduced by approximately $944,000. To address this issue, we have recommended that housing report on program income and the process by which figures are forecasted. In considering total resources available for allocation, including the entitlement amount, program income, and prior year savings, CDBG resources available for this year total $72.9 million, which is approximately $2.5 million less than the mayor's proposed budget allocated. And when including the other three grants of Home, ESG, and HOPWA, which remained relatively unchanged, total available resources for the 41st year are approximately $128 million. Because there are federal regulations as to how much of the grant can be spent on administrative costs, while the comp plan normally covers direct salaries, there's often an impact to the general fund, which covers the indirect or related costs of employees, such as pensions, health benefits, and other various costs to employ a staff member. A total of $6.9 million in related costs are assumed in this year's con plan. Of this amount, approximately $5.4 million will be reimbursed from CDBG funds to the general fund for related costs. Therefore, the general fund impact of the budget presented before you today is $1.5 million. Another factor affecting this year's con plan is the timeliness issue that the Housing Department has previously reported on. As a city, we are required by HUD to retain a CDBG balance of 1.5 times or below the city's annual entitlement amount. As of 60 days before the end of the program year, which fell on February 1st of this year, we were at a ratio of 1.53, which is too high. City staff continues to take steps to reduce this balance, including reprogramming unspent funds into eligible projects that are ready to expend. In doing a line-by-line analysis of unspent CDBG balances, our office was able to reprogram approximately $12.9 million this year. Because we were able to do a very thorough job this year, savings in the following years to come may not be as significant. However, we will continue to monitor project spending and make recommendations for reprogramming throughout the year. Due to our timeliness issue in our report, we have recommended that HCID, with the assistance of the CLA and CAO, be instructed to review all projects with outstanding balances as of June 30th, 2015, and provide a report with reprogramming recommendations. It is our hope to be able to fund projects that we couldn't include in this budget with reprogrammed dollars in the future. Our office does have one amendment to our report, Recommendation 22, relative to the report on the Clean Tech Business Incubator, should instruct the Economic and Workforce Development Department rather than HCID to report on the status of the project.
Okay. Members?
So I see that one of the instructions is number 20 specifically is to have the CAO and you all help us understand sort of why the discrepancy was what it was. And I'm just wondering if we could get HCID to come on up and sort of help us just at the 30,000-foot level understand sort of what it was that happened or what do we think that happened because subsequently it meant that we'd have to sweep some other project categories, and rightfully so in some cases where you have projects that aren't moving, but then there are some, like in my case, and you'll hear at the end of my comments, projects that are actually in negotiation or mid-project. So, and I realize it's hard to say only these days, $8.8 million, but nonetheless it was a pretty significant discrepancy.
Right. Well, let me just clarify. First, Rushmore Cervantes with the Housing and Community Investment Department. Want to thank the CLA's office for doing a very good job with in such a short time frame with a revised amount of money available. Just to give a point of reference, though, that HCID oversees approximately $1.8 billion in assets, and from them there are revenue streams that derive from them, primarily CRA dollars that recently came to the city, CDBG, and Home. The department does revenue forecasts every single year, 6 months, 7 months in advance, and does a deep dive looking at the historic trends of the payoffs as well as payments, and looks at the indices such as interest rates, looks at inflation rates, looks at anything like yield curves, anything that we can get our arms around where we think the trends are. The critical thing to understand is that even within CDBG, there's 10 to 11 different types of loans, and these go back as far as the earthquake period when we were issuing loans. So I want to give an example of where we are as far as last 2 years. We've averaged about $23.5 million in CDBG funds. Of that, 62% of that came from payments, that is payoffs. The rest were just regular payments or residual receipts. And the reason why that's important is that we can forecast and see the trends based on payments. However, we really cannot determine payoffs. So as an example, each year when we do our forecasts, we have 3 different levels. We have a conservative, we have the forecast, as well as we have an optimistic viewpoint. So we negotiate with the mayor's office, and of course CLA's office looks at it as well, and try to peg what we think is the appropriate income that will be coming in, based not only on historic perspectives on payments, but also what we anticipate we're going to be receiving as far as payoffs. And in the home funds, we'll see ups and down, undulations back up and down, but not really that significant. We saw a more significant drop in the payments of payoffs in CDBG. We've only received 1 in the last 6 months, which is highly unusual. So looking at the trends, we've got to look at perhaps another way to let me, before I talk about where we go next, I think it's important to note also is that if you look at the 2 pension systems, fire and police pension, as well as LACERS, we're relying on the performance of that portfolio in the stock market and their investments. And they have what they call a smoothing period, anywhere from 5 to 7 years, so that you can accommodate for the ups and downs, so that you can make a educated guess as where we're going to be 5 to 7 years out. We don't have that luxury. We have to do it on a year-to-year basis, and we're subject to whatever the payoffs are. So we don't control who's going to pay off. We can see based on the indices as far as interest rates, if they're going to be going up, then therefore we're not going to see potentially any kind of payoffs. We may see some refinancing, some payoffs. We don't necessarily control that. So within the framework of our portfolio with the 10 to 11 different type of loans, there's a recommendation to come back on a quarterly basis to review those, and we're more than welcome to quarterly reports. I think that's probably welcome, just so we can see the trends. I also think that perhaps we've looked at this within our office and trying to figure out what are the resources we could perhaps utilize. We have all the data that's available both internally as well as externally. We could perhaps work with the CLA's office and identify a consultant to be able to help us do a deeper dive on the portfolio and look at specific types of loans. Say, for instance, we've got 3 different types of earthquake loans. There could be a scenario where we've got one particular type of earthquake loan that is paying off or not paying off, and trying to see if there's any trends there. So I want to just preface the fact that there are fluctuations we don't control, and I think it's also important to note that the difference was presented as $8.8 million, but actually that's actually over a 2-year period, for this year as well as next year. The actual difference was $4.3 million. What we had projected was $16.9 million in program income for the year, and we ratcheted down to 12.7. So it's about 4.3 million. And when I mentioned earlier in my presentation that we provide 3 different types of projections, the low end, the most conservative projection, actually was at 12.7, the exact dollar amount that we're actually down to. So it's, we try to produce something that's within the margins with a 5% variance. If anything, we typically are conservative, and usually the income, the payments and the program income is usually exceeds our projections. In this particular case, is the first time in recent history, or at least recent memory of any of our staff, where we actually have a situation where the program income is lower. And again, it's not so much of the regular payments or residual receipt payments, it's because of the payoffs not being what we traditionally are accustomed to seeing. So are there lessons to be learned? Well, I'm not certain lessons to be learned, but certainly I think that we could avail ourselves to some potential forecasting software that may be able to help us do a deeper dive on our portfolio that perhaps give us a more realistic or a more refined revenue projection. But again, there's no way to fully know who's going to pay off their loans or not.
Sure. And I understand that there's going to be some variability. I guess where I get a little confused is that unlike investment funds, which are very difficult to sort of predict into the future and how their performance is going to be, to me, these seem more, the program income seems more linear, because we know sort of how much product we have out there. We can anticipate with, I think, some fair reasonable assumptions on how much income will come payoffs, I understand, would sort of throw a wrench into the process, but if you had more payoffs, wouldn't you then have more revenue for that programmatic year, and you can adjust for the following? So,
Absolutely.
So I guess I'm missing the point. Unlike investment funds, it seems to me that this would be a little bit easier to predict, wouldn't it?
Perhaps. Again, when you're talking about 62% of your projection is based on one-time transactions that there is no historic perspective on a property that we're going to have a payoff, it's a little harder. And if you don't have a smoothing period to be able to accommodate the highs and lows of a significant number of payoffs versus no payoffs, then you're really kind of stuck with that period of time. So the projection that we submitted 7 months ago anticipated a traditional number of payouts, and we've only received one. So, I mean, there's those things we can't control, and I think that the analysis that we could do, perhaps it could give us, based on the type of loan, potentially we may be able to identify some anomalies or some trends there that would enable us to more finely tune our projections when we look at it from a holistic standpoint versus doing deep dives on each individual type of loans that we have outstanding.
Because again, I guess, I'm looking forward to sort of the instruction to sort of come back, and maybe quarterly is the way to do this. But my assumption is that if there are no payoffs, then you sort of know what it is that you're getting as a result of program income minus losses. But if there are payoffs, the uptick is all that you get. There aren't downticks unless you have some sort of loss, but you can sort of factor that in. So I'm just wondering why the payoff
is factored in?
Yeah, because it's only to the positive. It's not to the negative.
Well, because the reason why it's important, Councilman, is that with federal funds, you need to spend the program income first. So you have to realize the program income and spend that before you actually spend your entitlement. So we always have to acknowledge that money coming in, and it's always been a majority of the actual monies that we have as far as the monies derived from the portfolio that we need to actually account for and spend for. So, in this particular case, we're going to estimate at $12.7 million. We're going to have to spend the monies that came in from the program income first before we spend any of the entitlement dollars.
Got it. The first in, last out.
Exactly.
Problem. Okay. So anyhow, I guess we'll maybe quarterly we can figure out how to segment sort of what's happening so we can understand what's happening. For the CLA, I'm really excited, intrigued by sort of your recommendation here, and subsequently instruction 23, to look at establishing another sort of loan program to help, as you say here, increase the amount of resources for public services, also investing in some of the harder hit communities in Los Angeles. And I know that the instruction is to formulate it and come back with recommendations, but give us sort of a 30,000-foot look at what it is that you all are suggesting.
I believe we had loan programs in the past, and I think that you would probably, it was before I worked on this plan personally, but this is where all the money's coming in now. I mean, we still do presently have loan programs, but just basically just coming up with I don't know exactly the details of this would be, that's why I want us to come back and talk about it, or talk with housing offline,
So, Rushmore, give me some ideas on what this looks like, because I guess sort of where I need to correlate the two is, so you've got, what I think is traditional loans for economic development purposes, but then here it references the potential for increasing service delivery.
Right.
So I'm trying to understand what that intersection
Well, it
looks
sounds similar to what we discussed about 6 months ago, Councilman, when we were thinking about how we were going to go around or come up with answers to the reduction in CBDO and coming up with a NERSA model and targeting certain areas of the city.
Okay.
And it sounds something similar to that, and much perhaps looking at a neighborhood assessment area where we could identify deep dive opportunities to leverage resources. So I think it's looking at the data and coming up with perhaps low mod targeted areas that we can invest both economic and housing dollars.
Okay. Well, I'm excited that we're finding a variation of what it is that we talked about 6 months ago, and I'm eager to see the good work and recommendations that you all come up with. I will say, Mr. Chair, if it's okay with you, what I'd like to see at the conclusion of the conversation, assuming that this passes out of committee, is that we amend the report to reduce the Economic Development Fund in the amount of $750,000, adding $250,000 to the Pacoima City Hall tenant improvements, which, as I mentioned earlier, are about 3/4 of the way through, and add $500,000 to the Pacoima Art Incubator and Youth Center, which is currently being negotiated. and further instruct the legislative analyst to review the Economic Development Fund at reprogramming to ensure that there are sufficient funds for additional economic development projects, which I think you alluded to in your presentation.
You had in addition to that?
Yeah, I'd like to just add to that. Amendment to reduce the Economic Development Fund an additional $250,000 and add that to the James Slauson Rec Center. This is a rec center in the southern part of the district that has been woefully neglected over the years. And we're hopeful that with these additional funds we can really move forward with the kind of improvements there that are going to make a difference in that part of our district, impacting citizens who are in great need. And so I too would ask that the CLA come back with an analysis or strategy for shifting those funds to achieve those ends.
All right, good. I've got that.
And if I may, Councilman, since we're talking potentially reprogramming dollars, I would be remiss if I didn't at least acknowledge the fact that whereas the CLA did not take any further cuts from the family source centers beyond what was initially proposed by the mayor's office, we're certainly appreciative of that, but I do understand that there's a need for additional resources for the family source centers to keep them at a level that they can accommodate the number of constituents that are coming into the centers that has been increased as a result of our agreement with the LA Unified School District, where additional constituents are coming in. Second of all, and no less important, are domestic violence shelters that have been cut dramatically, and certainly need resources to provide those needy services for those individuals that need to utilize those centers. It's unfortunate they need to be cut, but I think that you'll find that we absolutely need those services to be continued.
Any idea what kind of funding levels we're talking about for those two programs?
I can give you the specifics, Councilman, but certainly there are certainly gaps in both of those core services.
And it seems to me that in the instructions there are some recommendations to satisfy some of that. Am I incorrect?
We
At least I saw on...
We have instructed for domestic violence to explore non-con plan funding. 'Cause
Right.
They were funded, supplemented with general fund also. But we could add family source centers to that list as well.
Yes, I'd encourage that.
Can we move to public comment? Before we move on. Public comment, I've got Esther Park, LA Food Policy Council. Hello, Esther. Robert Baird, CHC. And Mark Loringer, Chrysalis. And Sherry. I think we've got a seat for you, Sherry. Sherry Revert, Partners in Care Foundation. Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Esther Park. I'm representing the LA Food Policy Council, a nonprofit initiative working to create a good food region in LA where food is healthy, affordable, fair, and sustainable for all. We urge you to keep the Healthy Neighborhood Market Network program in the budget to receive CDBG funds for economic development. This program provides micro-enterprise assistance to low and moderate income store owners working in food desert neighborhoods with a reported lack of healthy food retail. Investments in neighborhood markets increase access to nutritious foods quickly and efficiently and supports small business development and neighborhood revitalization without replacement of existing entrepreneurs and residents. There are thousands of small convenience stores and corner stores throughout the city. So far, this program has touched over 600 of these store owners through our outreach and trainings. And funding through CDBG will enable the program to offer ongoing TA to 10 additional corner stores for healthy market transformations and training events.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Robert?
Good afternoon, council members. I'm Robert Baird, a policy analyst with Community Health Councils, and also the co-chair of the Healthy Food Retail and Food Equity Work Group with the LA Food Policy Council. We are a group of over 50 stakeholder organizations and individuals who hope to see more healthy food options in underserved communities of the city. We're here to voice support for the line item that allocates CDBG funding for the Healthy Neighborhood Market program in the Consolidated Plan budget. All the health-oriented work that the city has been doing the last few years has highlighted the dearth of healthy food in so many of our communities. And this program is on the cutting edge of food desert type interventions. And since the dissolution of the CRA 3 years ago, the city hasn't been able to address food access in a meaningful way. And so this line item represents a step in the right direction and sorely needed momentum behind food retail access in underserved communities. So we hope this is a start. Thanks.
Thank you. Mark?
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Mark Larandra. I'm the president and CEO of Chrysalis. We help the homeless and those in poverty find and retain jobs, and we did that 1,600 times last year through our 3 offices. I'm here today to ask for your assistance to try to find a way to maintain the $110,000 that is proposed to be cut from our budget through the elimination of 3 contracts. It's not because we've been told we're not doing a good job or that we're not effective or that we're not meeting program goals. It's because of the shifting HUD priorities, the emphasis on permanent supportive housing and some of the other policy changes that are eliminating SSO contracts. It struck me that in the mayor's transmittal letter for this package, the very first sentence mentioned that finding jobs for Angelenos is his top priority, and yet programs like ours are being cut back. We just invested $1 million in Councilmember Fuentes' district for a new center, and these dollars were going to help pay for staff in that office. So I'd ask for your consideration to find another way. Thank you.
Thank you. Sherry?
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Sherry Revord, Director of Advocacy and Outreach for Partners in Care Foundation. Last time I was here, I mentioned to you that we really kind of desperately need you to keep our funding for the chronic disease self-management programs at its current level without the $300,000 proposed cut in order to facilitate the success of the network we're building, network of community-based organizations who will contract with health plans. And if we had one more year, we can get that network up and running and create revenue streams that will fund chronic disease self-management. I've given you an overview of National Council on Aging results, the first on-the-ground study of the impact that chronic disease self-management programs actually have on lives. And you'll see savings in healthcare, and I would imagine you'd also see savings in non-collectible ambulance fees from high-risk patients of healthcare systems not calling LAFD and 911 all the time. So I think it's a very holistic matter in terms of the overall health of our community.
Thank you. Matthew Callahan? Jasmine or Jasmine Ortiz, Ultimate. Nellie Velpert, JFS. And Ben Schreiner, Rainbow Services.
Good afternoon. My name is Matthew Callahan with Los Angeles Partners in Homeownership. We're a nonprofit organization that works to expand homeownership opportunities for low-income families in the city of LA. And here today to speak in favor of the funding recommendations for the city's homeownership program, notwithstanding agenda item number 1, where you agree to write off losses. The actual full picture is that the homeownership portfolio is a significant net contributor to the Consolidated plan and an extremely popular program for stabilizing neighborhoods, strengthening the tax base, reducing crime, and probably the best path for helping low-income families build wealth. So look for your support for homeownership programs. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, council members. My name is Jasmine Ortiz, and I'm a policy analyst at Ultimate Health Services. And we provide health services to the communities of underserved communities in Los Angeles. And we're also part of the Los Angeles Aging Advocacy Coalition. We are in great support of the EBP program, and we support the continued funding at the same level of the EBP program. Thank you.
Thank you. Nancy?
Yeah. Good afternoon. I'm Nancy Volpert. I'm the Director of Public Policy for Jewish Family Service. It feels familiar to be sitting in front of you again. As you all know, JFS is a provider of multiple social services, including resources for older adults and shelter and services for survivors of domestic violence. So first, to echo Jasmine, we are concerned that we preserve funding, including the general fund portion for evidence-based programs that help keep older adults safe and healthy at home. It is where the world is moving, and it is where services need to be for us to continue to be a player on the national level. And then, as a DVSO provider, however, we think we're in a crisis. When we got the documents this week with the CLA reporting, despite their comments otherwise, you're looking at a 31% cut in funding to DVSO programs out of CDBG, in addition to last year's $500,000 from general fund dollars, which is uncertain at best and unreliable going forward.
Thank you.
Yes, good afternoon. Nice to be back. Ben Shermer, Executive Director of Rainbow Services, also a domestic violence shelter operations provider. I put together, actually, we pulled together some information to make this a little bit easier, and I don't know if you all have received a copy of this. I have extra copies. There you go. But what this shows is how the funding has decreased over time, and the CLA's current proposed budget for domestic violence shelters would basically reduce our funding in half. And so there's a bunch of us that will be talking about the impact of that. But what I'd like to point out is that that loss of funding would mean that we would be able to provide a little over 25,000 less shelter bed nights. So that's, figure an average of a 30-day stay, which is average for somebody in an emergency shelter. That's over 800 victims of domestic violence that would not get services if we go through at this funding level. It also means, because I know employment's an important thing, it's a loss of at least 27 jobs across the 10 agencies.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Denise Miller? Isa Cerda, Katie Tyler, and Pat Butler. Yes, Denise.
Good afternoon. My name is Denise Miller. I'm the program manager for the Rita Walters Learning Complex.
Yes.
We're located in South Los Angeles, and we're a multi-facility that provides services for 0 and up. I wanted to take the time out to thank Councilman Cedillo and Councilman Price and Fuentes and the Housing Committee for finding available funds to keep our doors open. We appreciate the fact that you understand the important services that we provide to the community. We do citywide services, and I really am grateful that the community and my staff will still be able to provide these services. So I wanted to thank you for all of your efforts.
I speak for myself. I think my colleagues agree with me. Thank you for the great work that you do. Obviously, Ms. Walters is a giant leader in our community, and attaching her to your organization is
yes.
the
Thank
right thing
you.
to do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Isa Cerda with the Chicana Service Action Center. We operate an emergency and transitional domestic violence shelter. One of the services that domestic violence agencies conduct is mass amount of outreach to the community on preventative measures, education, and training on domestic violence. Preventative efforts ultimately reduce the occurrence of domestic violence by promoting healthy, respectful, nonviolent relationships. The proposed funding deduction will decrease those services and/or cut those services.
Hi, I'm Pat Butler. I'm Director.
If you could use the microphone, please.
They didn't give me a mic. Hi, Pat Butler with Sojourn, also a domestic violence service provider. I wanted to point out that one of the things that happens to victims of domestic violence a lot of times when they leave their abusive homes is that they become homeless, which I know you know. A lot of women and children are on the streets because of domestic violence, and if we are unable to provide our services and our shelters, the homeless problem will only get worse. But I also want to make sure that everyone is clear that we are not just shelters. That isn't all we do. We provide comprehensive services, and the victims who come to us, obviously we're working to keep them alive, but also to continue their safety and their self-sufficiency so they don't have to live with batterers anymore. When our clients find themselves homeless, it's because they're victims of crime. They're victims of crime. So I think that we owe them something.
Hello, I'm Katie Tyler, Haven Hills. I'm also a DVSO representative, and Along with my colleagues, I think the funding cuts would be hugely detrimental to the community, and I particularly want to focus on the cost to children. I think sometimes people forget that many of our services are geared towards children, and a popular study that came out recently is the ACEs study by Dr. Vincent Folletti that you may be familiar with. And in short, the study shows that adverse childhood experiences are linked in a significant and meaningful way to health problems later in life. So I think it's important to remember that leaving children in homes where domestic violence is occurring means more adverse childhood experiences, and it means that there will be greater costs to the community in the long term if we aren't able to provide support, if we aren't able to take children out of the domestic violence homes.
Thank you. Toby Quintiliani? Debbie Nelson? Eve Sheedy and Veronica Olmos.
Hi, I'm Toby Quintiliani, Senior Director at 1736 Family Crisis Center. And in unity with our colleagues, I'm here to say that the domestic violence community cannot withstand any more cuts. We are in imminent danger at 1736 of having to close beds because we won't be able to afford to operate. However, in contrast, there are more innocent victims of domestic violence to serve. Mayor Garcetti and Chief Beck had a press conference in January where it was reported that domestic violence reports are up 20%. Chief Beck encouraged all LAPD divisions to partner with domestic violence agencies, but that won't help with more cuts to our funding. On average, there have been 48,000 calls in a year. These calls come from the most innocent victims of crime running for their lives, so where are they going to go? They're going to go onto the streets of LA. They're going to be homeless. We fear that the city's losing focus on domestic violence. The Homeless Family Solution Services redesign for coordinated homeless delivery, we feel, has failed to adequately protect domestic violence victims, and it's resulted to other financial cuts to our agency and to the domestic violence community. Thanks.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Debbie Nelson. I'm also with 1736 Family Crisis Center. And along with my colleagues, I want to stress the potential seriousness of any further cuts to our domestic violence programs. Any further cuts represent danger to victims of domestic violence and their children. As service providers, we know that victims are fleeing life-threatening circumstances, and we intervene at a critical time so that violence doesn't lead to murder. A loss of beds or any domestic violence services will destroy the safety net we have created to protect victims and their children. With no place to go, they are at immediate risk of harm and murder. We can't allow them to live in danger and fear when there are experienced providers who are available to help keep them safe, but whose hands will be tied if there are any further funding cuts. On a separate note, 1736 also runs an FSC, and we need to maintain our funding in order to provide the level of services we are currently providing. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name's Eve Sheedy. I'm the chair of the Domestic Violence Task Force. I actually don't run a program. I work in the city attorney's office. But what we've been trying to show you is how domestic violence interacts with all other programs and all sorts of city services. Additionally, the mayor recently announced an expansion of the DART teams, the domestic abuse response teams, which he wants to expand with private funding from 10 to 21 police divisions. Every single DART team and every single DART advocate refers those people, the people to whom they respond, to a domestic violence service provider. We're now down in the present proposal to $1.1 million for 10 agencies. That will prevent those services from being available. So on one hand, we're going to expand. On the other hand, when the advocate's on the scene and someone says, do you need shelter, they'll say, sorry, we have nowhere to send you. So we're asking you to find funding either through the CDGB funding or through general fund. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Veronica Olmos with Central City Neighborhood Partners, and I'm here on behalf of the Family Source Coalition. if the members can please stand. We're here in essence of time. I'm speaking on behalf of the group, and we are here to speak in favor of the consolidated plan and the most recent comment that Rushmore Cervantes made about looking at general fund money that might be able to sustain the family source to its current level of funding, as well as the domestic violence shelters. We know that these are really vulnerable programs that support the most vulnerable families, and something that is direly needed. And it's really unique to the delivery of the work that we do and the amount of clients that we serve, close to 50,000 clients. And we see that this one-stop resource hub that we're serving is seeing a greater need. We're seeing families come with us with immigration services and housing and foster youth. And so we ask for your support. And on a side note, in helping vulnerable families and the great work that you do, Councilmember Cedillo, I just want to honor you and wishing you a happy birthday. You've done so much to help the vulnerable for CD1. I know you're our council member, and so just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart and wish you the best today.
Happy birthday.
Raul Estrada, Mary Davis, Jessie Needham, and Casey Lovelace. Darren, Devon, Casey Lovelace. What's happening?
Good afternoon. Council members, Fuentes, Cedillo, and Price. First and foremost, my name is Raul Estrada. I'm with El Centro de Ayuda, but I'm really not here on behalf of El Centro de Ayuda. Like my colleague, Veronica, I'm here on behalf of the Family Source Center Collaborative. We know these are tough times. These are probably the most difficult times that I can ever remember in the last 25 years working with the city. And that being said, I first and foremost, I really want to thank you for your continued support, especially on behalf of the Family Source Center. The reality is that we fully support the continued partnership with LAUSD. It's a great partnership. However, I respectfully request that, if at all possible, that you can secure, as Rushmore Cervantes and as Veronica mentioned, possibly secure the $800,000 that's needed to fund LAUSD, possibly through the general funds, rather than through the funding that's coming through the Family Source Center, which would greatly reduce our ability to really service those families that we do. So thank you for your continued support.
Hello, my name is Mary Davis, and I'm with Angel Step In. It's another domestic violence emergency shelter, and I've come here today to ask you to go ahead and continue the funding, whether it comes in through the general funds. In the last year alone, our agency, our shelter, saw over 200 unduplicated clients. Many of those, as is one of my colleagues, Katie, was talking about, are children. We have, as a nonprofit, we understand about the fact about having to have a budget. We have made changes in our budget. We are at a skeletal staff as it is. With this kind of cut, we're talking about 2 full-time staff employees. If that happens, it's not only the loss of their jobs. Those full-time employees are talking about 10,000 services a year. Those services are all tied in with safety, whether it's safety in getting a restraining order or safety in with helping them be in a safe place where they can go on to another program to find employment so they can be able to take care of themselves and for their children. Thank you very much, and thank you for and hope for your continued support.
Hi, committee members. I'm Jessie Needham. I work at the Center for the Pacific Asian Family. We are another DVSO provider. We really appreciate your allowing us all to speak today. Obviously, you've heard the importance of our program. I'm here to talk a little bit about the importance of the DVSO program for the many immigrants that live in the LA city. LA obviously prides itself on multiculturalism. It prides itself on a lot of services that are made available to immigrants. The DVSO program provides services in multiple languages to multiple groups of vulnerable people from different ethnic communities. And if the funding for these agencies gets cut, then in addition to the barrier of domestic violence, to find housing, to find employment, to regain self-sufficiency and wellness, immigrants will be additionally vulnerable to the many dangers that they face in their lives. So we really appreciate your support, hopefully to restore the funding back to its original level and also to find additional funding in the general fund. Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm Dawn Casey Lovelace. I'm the Civic Engagement Coordinator for St. Barnabas Senior Services and the Los Angeles Aging Advocacy Coalition. We have brought a copy of our sign-on letter in support of evidence-based programs. It's signed by 15 different organizations, 6 of which are represented here today. And we just strongly request that you keep the funding at last year's level. These evidence-based programs, over 4,000 seniors participated in the evidence-based programs last year. And the demand for these programs continues to grow in the face of a 25% cut. So we just strongly recommend that the funding stay at the same as it was last year, and we look to find new funding for it. Thank you.
Thank you.
But can I circulate this?
Yes. Mr. Herman?
Well, we're all aware that there has to be a sacrifice, and that sacrifice means we have to cut. And those cuts come at the expense of our mayor, former councilman, who negligence didn't provide provisions to foresee the problems that would occur, many of you losing your positions, which you well deserve for not speaking up on behalf of this budget. The vulnerable are those who are disabled, the population that you have neglected, abused, and you are liable for the reasons why I am speaking on behalf of this subject, on top of all the number of people who spoke. And so now that the clock is winding down, because I'm not going to elaborate anymore on this, there has to be control of a budget. We must stop abuse, waste, and fraud. It is unacceptable, and administration is mainly at fault. And besides, Mr. Johnson, please don't harass me in this meeting ever again. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I want to thank all the advocates for coming. I think everybody in this committee agrees with you. Nobody wants to make any cuts. And I think all of us look to the next battle with the general fund. And we have to see what's in the mayor's budget. It's not here. You don't have to convince us. There's no one at this table who needs convincing or advocacy. We admire and appreciate what you've made as your career choices and what you do. We only take the actions we take because we are limited to that. If we could do more, we would. So with that, I just want to approve the CLA's report. I want to make some final amendments, if I may. Good? Yes. So I want to amend recommendation 18 to instruct HCID to prepare and transmit for council approval a draft RFP, policies and guidelines for the selection of Family Source Center operator throughout the city within 30 days. I have this in writing for everybody. Amend recommendation 21 to instruct HCID to report on specific project information for the Great Streets line item, including scope, budget, application process, and guidelines within 30 days. Funds cannot be expended until this information is provided. Amend recommendation 23 to instruct EWDD with HCID assistance to report on the feasibility of creating a small business loan program or other loan programs, including a seismic retrofit assistance program to general additional program income within 60 days. For the Lincoln Heights Jail Capital Improvements Project is moving forward, therefore we instruct the CLA to ensure that funds are identified during the reprogramming of this project. And finally, delete the Council District 1 street improvements line item and add $50,000 to the Glassell Park Community and Senior Center, and add the remaining $50,000 to the Downey Recreation Center in Lincoln Heights.
Mr. Chair, just a clarification on your amendment to 23. Is that a seismic retrofit program in addition to looking at creating a small business loan program?
Mhm.
So it's not in replacing it or with a focus solely on seismic? Okay.
Right.
It's just another look at that. Okay, good. Just because the report's focuses so much on program income that I want to sort of keep our eye on program income too.
Yep.
Okay.
Good.
And that includes Mr. Price's amendments as well as mine.
Correct, and your amendments as well?
And the amendment from the CLA.
And the amendment from the CLA. I'm happy to move the report as amended.
I'll second.
Move second. This will be the order.
That concludes the business for the committee.
Thank you. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.